What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Clint from the Die Hard MMA podcast, and today we have the first ever episode of Total Madness. That's right, we are going to break down the fight card coming up this weekend, Saturday the 13th, and we are going to look at the totals, over and unders, and see if we can unlock any extra value coming up on this fight card. We've already got a couple of straight bets, and I'm really a fan of everybody that I'm on already this week, but we can always find some more betting opportunities, and these totals tend to come out a little later in the week, and that's always been our issue. When we do our live streams on Tuesdays, when I do the Die Hard MMA podcast live on Mondays, we don't always have totals. In fact, we almost never do. So all we can do is speculate at what we think the lines might be. Well, this show is where you get all the information firsthand. We're going to look at what the totals are, what the lines are, and we're going to take another look back at those fights and see if we can find any spots that we like. So buckle up, folks. Let's get right on into this thing. Our very first fight of the night listed here, it looks like we've got Anthony Iving taking on Christian Aguilera. Now, we talked about this fight not being one that I was overly interested in betting. We've got a heavy, decent-sized favorite in Ivy coming in at minus 190, and I'm not sold on the kid. He looks like he should be the favorite. His opponent, Aguilera, doesn't seem to be UFC caliber. But then again, we're not entirely sure Ivy is either. What we have here is an over-under 1.5. They've got the over set at minus 125 and the under is plus 105. So very tight line, right smack in the middle of the fight. And this, I'm just going to lean on my initial read. I'm not touching this one. If you had to make me make a pick, I would probably lean with going on the under 1.5, considering Aguilera's got a bad record. He doesn't belong at this level. Ivy was pumped up and ready to go for his UFC debut last week, and he's probably going to look to make a statement here. But again, I really think that this is a fireball and popcorn type of fight. Sit back, watch it, check these guys out, see if either one of them has a future in the UFC, but we're not going to know anything about them really until fight time. So even with the over under 1.5, I don't see anything there that I particularly like. The next fight they've got lined up here is Julia Avila taking on Gina Mazani. Now, we all know where I stand on Julia Avila on the Die Hard MMA podcast and on the Roundtable Breakdown on Tuesdays. I talked about just how high I am on this girl. She's minus 500 at this point, a ton of money, absolute flood of money coming in on her, and she's taking on Gina Mazani. The total is set at 2.5, which in women's MMA is totally common. 2.5 is normally what we're going to see, and generally it's juiced to the over because a lot of women's fights go the full 15-minute distance. Well, in this case, we aren't the only ones seeing that Avila is super dangerous here. They've got the total set at 2.5 with the under being minus 135. So if you do want to take that under, if you do want to take Julia Avila inside the distance, you're going to have to pay that premium for it. Now, here's where I get a little bit interesting. I do think that Julia Avila is going to finish this fight. I think that she's got every opportunity to do so. She is better than Gina Mazani everywhere. However, Gina Mazani is a tough chick. And if you're gonna take this bet that Julia Avila wins inside the distance, I would much rather lean on that prop. This is opposite of what I normally would do. Normally speaking, you want to go ahead and account for both fighters. You take the under 1.5 or the under 2.5, so that way if the other fighter pulls the upset, if the other fighter gets in there and lands some kind of flash KO or a fluky sub, you protect yourself. You make sure that you're getting both sides of the coin when you bet that under, but in this case, the only one I see capable of finishing is Avila. I don't think Mazani has any path to victory finishing Avila in this fight, and the only way I think this is a problem is if it ends up going past that 2.5 rounds and we get to a decision. So honestly, if you were gonna play this one, I wouldn't be touching that under 2.5. I'd be taking the plus odds on the over 2.5, simply from a line value perspective. Like I said, when it comes to women's fights, you're paying 225 minus 300 on a fight to go over 2.5. Right here, we've got an opportunity at a plus 115 to go over 2.5. And I wouldn't mind that angle whatsoever if you're just going to bank on the toughness of Gina Mazani. Now, I've already got Avila mixed up in a parlay. I think Avila might have a good shot at finishing this thing, but since I've got her in a parlay, I'm a little bit biased here. If you think she gets it done, if you think she's going to finish Mazani, taking her inside the distance is the way to go. However, I would just take that prop straight because then you get the extra 2.5 minutes at the end of the fight. If she finishes Mazani with 1 minute left to go, the over cashes and the prop would have been the way to go, and you just don't want to end up in that type of a position. This is kind of a pass situation, in my opinion. The prop on Avila is the way to go, or maybe take a sprinkle on that over 2.5 if you want to rely on the toughness of Mazani. I don't see any point in taking the under 2.5 when we don't have a second party that's going to help contribute to cashing it. Moving on down the line here, we've got Hannah Cyphers taking on Maria Agrappa, and this is one that I talked about. I like Maria Agrappa a lot in this case, and this is a spot that I'm actually taking the opposite stance of the fight that we just talked about. This is another women's fight. It's another very interesting situation, and they've got the over-under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 is juiced at -110. It's exactly what we were talking about in that last matchup. Now, we talked about Agrappa having a very similar skill set to some of the fighters that Cyphers has lost to in the past, and because of that, I think there's a decent shot that she gets on top of Cyphers at some point, transitions into a mount, and puts her away. I think that Agrappa has a very slick rear naked choke. She doesn't take fights to the ground, but once it gets there, she has that weapon available to her, and she hits with some big power. She's got big body shots that she likes to work with, and Cyphers is at a massive size disadvantage here. She's sitting as a -245 favorite right now. That over-under, you're getting, like I said, 2.5 rounds, and the under is +175. Now, taking unders in women's fights, generally speaking, is very sketchy. There's a reason they're juiced so hard to the over. But I think there's an outside shot that Agrappa is just too much for Cyphers to handle on that quick turnaround. Not to mention, Cyphers actually has a little bit of pop on her punches. She is the kind of fighter that could come in here and she could make something happen. She's taking a short notice fight to wash that recent loss out of her mouth. I don't think that she's going to be able to do it because I think she's just going to have a hard time hitting Agrappa. But this is the kind of fight where you're getting two dance partners. We are getting Agrappa, who could finish the fight. We also have Hannah Cyphers, who hits like a truck. So she will actually be helping us get to that under 2.5 if you want to take it. +175, not so bad. I would be very tempted to take a flyer on that one. I'm not making an official pick on it. I'm not locking that one in just yet, but that's one that I've kind of circled. I've got my eye on. Mark De La Rosa versus Jourdain Espinoza. Jourdain Espinoza is the favorite here at -160. I know a whole lot of people who are looking at Mark De La Rosa as a juicy dog here at +140. Mark is very well-rounded. Good skills, good wrestling, BJJ black belt. He's just a little small. He's not as explosive as you'd like him to be. Jourdain Espinoza is the exact opposite. He's not nearly as technical as Mark is anywhere. However, he's extremely explosive. He's fast. He's got good in and out movement. He lands good leg kicks, whips his legs around. He's got good hips. So this is a opposites attract type of fight here. Now, Mark De La Rosa's path to victory is the submission. Espinoza has really struggled on the mat, and he's coming off of 2 back-to-back submission losses. This is another one where I'm very, very interested in the under. We've got a 2.5 total set by the odds makers. Over 2.5 is set at -230. The under 2.5 is +190, and that's what we're looking for. You've got two guys that are capable of finishing. You've got two guys that are going to go to war. They're both coming off losses. They're both fighting for their jobs. So the under is very much live here, in my opinion. If Mark De La Rosa can get this fight to the mat, he's a serious threat to finish inside the distance. He also is coming off of a very, very bad knockout in his last fight, and Espinoza has that athletic edge over him. So if he blitzes in and lands a big head kick or a big bomb, something like that, he could put De La Rosa out. So I think the under 2.5 is a very interesting look in this fight, and you're getting the number that we're looking for. We're getting +190, almost 2-to-1 on our money to roll those dice. This is another one that I've circled that I want to take a very, very close look at and potentially putting a bet on a little bit later in the week. I want to see the weigh-ins. That's a fight where I want to see the weigh-ins. I want to see how Mark stands up to Espinoza before I really pull the trigger on it, because I tend to agree with the favorite money on Espinoza. However, I'm kind of backtracking on that and thinking about Mark De La Rosa as an underdog here. But this is where an over-under is a perfect play, because you're not picking a side. You don't have to count on a fighter. You just have to look for an outcome. The next fight on the card is Charles Jourdain versus Andre Touchy Fili. This is the one, folks. This is the one. I had this one circled going into this fight, and it's one I'm extremely interested in. So Charles Jourdain is my boy. I've already given it out. I'm on him. I got +190 in my pocket, and he is a warrior. He takes the fight to absolutely everybody he gets in there with, and he normally wins by knockout. He's got a 100% finish rate. He's got all knockouts and 1 submission on his record. Andre Fili on the flip side of this thing, he is a deadly finisher himself. He's got great wrestling ability. He's got good submissions, but he's got big power too. He rocked Sadiq Youssef in his last fight, and if it wasn't for the physicality and the wrestling ability of Sadiq Youssef, Andre Fili had a shot to put him out. So what we're getting is an over-under 2.5, and the over is -175. The under is +155. We're not even getting a pick'em line here, folks. We are getting a under with plus odds on 2 absolute monster knockout artists. Charles Jourdain is a monster when he gets in there. He wings punches. He's a wild man. He looks to break his opponent at every single opportunity. But what that means is he's open for counters. He relies on his chin. This kid gets punched, and I'm fully aware of that. I think this is a coin flip fight, but he is open for counters, and Fili having a reach advantage is going to be the type of fighter who can take advantage of those openings. And if Jourdain is going to win this thing, he's going to touch Fili's chin. He's not going to outclass a guy like Touchy Fili who's got a reach advantage on him and a wrestling advantage on him for 15 straight minutes. He's going to have to go to war, and he's going to have to touch Fili's chin to get this thing done. The under 2.5 at +155, I am very interested in. Like I said, I've got this one circled, and this is one that I've been looking very, very closely at. I'm looking at possibly locking in this under as soon as possible. I'm not going to go official right this second because I want to see just how many of these totals I'm in love with before we get going. The other thing to remember is this line is ping-ponged around a little bit. Some of the money initially has come on this under. I'm not the only one thinking that the under 2.5 has value, and the line has bounced back already, so we're getting the good number. It's just a matter of whether or not we want to roll those dice. But I think this is an excellent opportunity to take that under 2.5. And I don't know if I want to combine it. The reason I'm hesitating here is because I'm already on Jourdain. So the fact that I've got a 2-to-1 dog on this one, if I take the under and Fili wins inside the distance, that hedges out my bet. That gives me a +155 if Fili gets it done and lands a knockout kill or a submission. The only problem for me would be as if Fili wins by 15-minute decision, and then I'm losing 2 units instead of just the 1. So I have to be very careful on how I play this one. Borg versus Merabh. Now this one is one that I don't think there's worth any time spending on here. Borg is a wrestler. Merabh is an incredible wrestler himself. Both these guys have absolute granite chins. Neither of these guys has the punching power to put the other one out. The only way I can see a stoppage happening in this fight is if one of them happens to get to a dominant position and gets a TKO, and I don't see that being Borg. The only one who's capable of that, in my opinion, is going to be Merabh. So if Merabh is able to work his way on top of Borg, get him in some kind of a crucifix position, the mount, something along those lines, and just starts raining down punches, that's the only way I see this fight ending, and I would rather get the extra money on Merabh inside the distance as a straight prop rather than taking the under, because once again, we don't have a dance partner. We don't have Borg that's capable of finishing. He's not going to get Merabh down. He's not going to get Merabh's back. He won't be a submission threat, and even though Borg has very sharp boxing, very crisp, very high-level hands, he doesn't have the power that he needs to knock a guy like Merabh out. So the under is set at 2.5, and you're getting +270, so it's a nice juicy total, but the over at -330, that's almost as good as taking Merabh at -420. If you like parlays, if you're looking for another piece that's a little more playable, I think that over 2.5 is an excellent spot to look because Merabh is already out of control. I got him much earlier before he even hit -300, so I'm hesitant to tell you to parlay him at -420, but that over 2.5, that seems pretty good to me. The next fight on the card, we're at the co-main event. Karl Roberson taking on Marvin Vettori. This is the other one that I was very, very interested in. So we've got yet another total set at 2.5. The bookmakers seem to think that we're going to be seeing the judges' scorecards quite a bit in Vegas this weekend, and I don't know that I agree. We're in the Apex, we're in the small cage, there's going to be a lot less room for these people to run. We've been seeing a whole hell of a lot of finishes on these fight cards, and I think that's due to the fact that there's 5 less feet. You've got to fight for your life that much sooner when you get into the octagon. Karl Roberson is a power striker. This guy comes in looking to take your head off every single time. He attacks with leg kicks, big power punches, and he's a threat on the feet. Marvin Vettori, on the flip side of this thing, is a threat on the ground, and we know that's where Carl Roberson's biggest weakness is. The 2 times in the UFC that he's faced an opponent that's been able to take him down, they have immediately transitioned to the mount. They have immediately transitioned to an arm triangle, and he gave up the same exact submission in both fights. Marvin Vettori is fully capable of doing that. So this over and under, once again set at 2.5, is very, very tempting to me. We've got the over juiced to -220. The under is +180. I think that under 2.5 at +180 is a pretty slick look because Carl Roberson needs the finish. If one of these guys is going to win this thing by a full 15-minute decision, it's going to be Marvin Vettori. He's going to be the guy with the wrestling in his back pocket. He's going to be the physically stronger of the two. He'll be able to put Roberson on his back or pin him up against the cage, get him down. That's the type of game plan where Vettori thrives. The other thing you've got to remember is the emotion with these two. The amount of fights that have been canceled on a young and emotional, hot-headed Marvin Vettori. He's ready to kill somebody. He's ready to rip someone's head off. So I think he's coming in here for the finish to begin with, but that also makes him emotional and will open him up to the counters of Carl Roberson. If Carl Roberson is able to drag this thing out past the first round, get it into round 2, maybe even the start of round 3, if he can defend some of those takedowns and wear Vettori out, he might be able to land some kind of a big bomber, a KO, before that 2.5-minute mark. I think the under 2.5 at +180, once again, is a very, very tempting position on this fight. We've got a couple that I already like the look of. We're at the main event here. Cynthia Calvillo taking on Jessica Eye, and we talked about the women's totals here. They've got it set at 4.5. This is a main event, so we've got 5 rounds to work with instead of 3. The issue here, neither of these women are very prudent when it comes to finishing. Neither of them have a whole lot of finishes on their career. I do think Cynthia Calvillo is a bit of a submission threat. I do think Jessica Eye is a little bit of a TKO threat. However, neither of these women are chinny. Both of them are very durable, very strong, very capable. I honestly think this is going to go the full 25 minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if Cynthia Calvillo manages to get some kind of a ground and pound TKO. She did show that ability in her last fight when she fought Rodriguez, and she was down on the judges' scorecards 2 rounds to none, and in the 3rd round came out and got a 10-8 because she was doing her damnedest to try and finish the fight. She's been on record stating that she doesn't want to let this fight go to the judges' scorecards because she felt like she got hosed in her last fight, and she doesn't want to flip that coin. She wants to finish Jessica Eye, put a stamp on it, and make sure this fight gets locked up for her. So the under 4.5 at +175, if you believe that, I wouldn't mind taking the shot. Jessica Eye is coming in here on short notice. She may not have the gas tank to go a full 25 minutes, which means she may be coming out reckless as well. I don't like the over 4.5 at -210, even though I do think it's likely. I don't want to lay that kind of chalk on it going over because there's a lot of questions around both of these women in this particular fight. So honestly, when it comes to a totals perspective, this fight is a stay away for me. I don't like either of those numbers, and I don't like the round being set at 4.5. I will be staying completely away on that one. So that'll do it for the first episode of Total Madness. Let's recap here just a second. We have got a couple of fights that we are interested in here, and we're looking at Agapova, Hannah Cyphers, under 2.5 at +175. Mark De La Rosa, Jordan Espinoza, under 2.5 at +190. I like Jourdain and Fili, under 2.5 at +155. That one's probably my favorite look so far on the totals. And then Carl Roberson versus Marvin Vettori, under 2.5 at +185. I'm not sure which one of those I'm going to lock in just yet, but if you were going to bet the totals, those are the ways that I would lean. Follow me over on Twitter at DieHardMMAPod. I will be tweeting it out as soon as I decide to take the shot on any one of those totals. Be sure you subscribe to Odds HQ here on YouTube and head on over and give them a follow at Twitter as well. Thank you very much. Good luck on your action this weekend, and let's roll.